everybody, it's Emily Dark Schooling, and it's time to talk about what I read in October. And that would be a lot. I read a lot in October. I read 21 books, and I don't think I have it in me to talk about all 21 books, so we're just gonna go ahead and focus on the highlights. So most of what I read this month is middle grade. Like, I'm a Sybil's Awards judge. I am working in the middle grade fiction category, and so that is where most of my reading is. Middle grade fiction would be anything that is realistic fiction. So it could be historical fiction, it could be contemporary, but it has to be realistic for my category's purposes. So the grand majority, I think, 12 of the books I read this month were all for Sybil Awards purposes. So lots and lots of middle grade. And I don't have it in me to talk about all of it. In fact, some of it I read so long ago, way back at the beginning of the month, and I could not tell you more than the basic details. But I want to start by talking about The Luminous Life of Lucy Landry by Anna Rose Johnson. Last year? 2 years ago, when I did the Sybil's Awards, the last time, I read her debut, which I cannot think of the name of, but I'll pop a picture here, and I loved it. And so I was really excited to see that she had a book out this year in my category, and I immediately had to go read it. And I loved it so much. Okay, so Anna Rose Johnson writes middle grade historical fiction with an Indigenous focus. Her characters are always Indigenous, and they're Ojibwe. I love her writing. It feels like classic children's literature. So if you like things like The Secret Garden, A Little Princess, Heidi, that kind of feeling, Five Children and It, you know, that like nostalgic, cozy, like feels like a classic kind of writing, that is what her books are. This one is all about a girl whose parents are dead, and she is sent to go live with her distant relatives that she's never met, and they live in a lighthouse. And so she joins this family and is like trying to find her place in their family. She's afraid that they won't like her, that they might send her away. She can be a lot sometimes, but she's hopeful that she can find her place here. And I believe this is like at the turn of the century, like early 1900s, but it's so cozy. Like, I cannot speak to you enough about how like absolutely nostalgic her books feel. I will read absolutely anything and everything Anna Rose Johnson writes in the future. Fantastic. I gave this 5 stars. Then I read Grow Up, Luchi, Zapata. This is by Alexandra Alessandri. And this one surprised me. I really, really enjoyed this book, which I didn't expect, because this has a sort of a sports focus. They are on a soccer team, so there's quite a bit in this book about soccer, but that is not what the book is about. This is a story about 2 best friends who are starting to like find that they are no longer feeling like they're compatible. Like that like moment where like one of them grows up a little bit more over the summer than the other, and they don't have anything in common anymore. And the one friend has like started hanging out with the mean girls, and maybe she's just like not wanting to hang out with this girl anymore who she sees as younger than her, even though they're the same age. And so this story is about these 2 friends, and they're like kind of friendship breakup, but also they have this whole feud situation happening where they're like constantly like getting back at each other and ramping it up until like things are tense. And I really loved this. I found myself absolutely compelled by like their friendship breakup story, and like, are they going to find a way back to each other? What will happen to them over the course of the story? It also has a lot to say about their heritage. Both of the girls are Colombian, and one has been back to Colombia. She speaks Spanish. The other one feels like she's not really Colombian enough. She doesn't speak Spanish. She's never been back to Colombia. She doesn't know anything really as much about her culture as she thinks the other girl does, so she feels like she's not really Colombian enough. I thought the representation in this book was really good. I really enjoyed the story, and I think it's definitely worth a read, and I gave that 5 stars. I read The Bletchley Riddle by Ruta Sepetys and Steve Sheinkin. I've talked about this already, but I love this book so much. This was so fun. I love middle grade historical fiction, especially middle grade historical fiction set during World War II. And this one focused on like code breakers in England. This is a story about a brother and a sister who are living at Bletchley Park. The brother is like 18 or 19, I think, and he is like has a job at Bletchley Park working with the code breakers. His little sister ends up coming to stay with him because she doesn't want to go to America with her grandmother, aunt, I don't remember. And so she like escapes her caregiver, I can't remember if it's her grandmother or her aunt, and goes to stay with her brother at Bletchley Park. Their mother is missing and presumed dead, but she is determined to find out what happened and prove that she's still alive. And so that's kind of what the story is about. It's about the code-breaking situation. It's about spies. It's about finding out what happened to the mom. There is a whole lot of really well-researched history here. There's a lot to do with like spy work and riddles and code-breaking, and it was so fun. Like, I loved this. I think it's absolutely fantastic historical fiction. I think if you are studying World War II with a middle grade to like younger high school age student, you should add this to your list. I'm probably going to add it to the World War II unit study when I get around to that update. I read Songs for the Brokenhearted by Ayelet Sabari. This I got as an ARC. I think it came out in September, so I was a little behind, but I finally finished it. I really, really liked this. I don't even begin to know how to talk about it though. This is a book set in 2 timelines, and we're following the daughter storyline, but we're also learning about her mother's past. So I think we're in like 1950 and 1990s for the 2 timelines. And it opens with the daughter coming home to Israel, and she's there because her mother has died, and she's going to the funeral and all of that, and like cleaning up after her mother has passed and like going through her things, and she discovers some letters and wants to know more about her mother's past because there's some stuff that she is uncovering that she'd never heard of before. And this is a story about Yemeni Jews in Israel in the 1950s, like when they first come, and then like what it's like to be a Yemeni Jew in the 90s in Israel. And I thought this was really well done. I'd never really read anything from that perspective before, and it was really interesting to read about. There's a lot to do with like assimilation and how they felt like, you know, they couldn't be Yemeni. They had to try to be more Ashkenazi to fit into Israeli society. There's a lot to do with like Yemeni culture and how it worked within Judaism. There's a lot about like the family dynamic too, which I don't want to get too into because like I feel like the less you know, the more interesting the story is. This is a little bit slower. I did feel like the pacing could have been a little bit faster with some of the like the reveals about her mother's past, but I thought it was really, really interesting and really well done. So if you don't mind a slower burn book, this was really worth reading, I think, and I gave this 4 stars. I read Finally Heard by Kelly Yang. This I really, really liked a lot because, one, Kelly Yang's books are just spectacular, but also I thought this book was great because it focuses on kids and social media and the damage that that can cause. Yeah, so I think this is a sequel actually. I have not read the first book. I think it's Finally Seen is the first book, and this one, Finally Heard, is the second part. I don't know if there's going to be more, so I don't know if this is like a duology or if it'll end up being like a trilogy at some point. We're following a girl whose mother owns her own business. She's just come over from China. Her family came ahead of her. She was staying with her grandmother. And so she's still kind of trying to find her place in American society. Like, she doesn't quite feel like she fits in yet. She's still learning, like, the language sometimes. And her mother has this online business, and she starts doing videos and stuff for it, for social media purposes. And so she starts helping her mom out with making these videos, and then she decides that, like, that could be her like little business that she runs, where she helps other people make videos. But in the process, she's spending a lot more time focusing on social media, and it's doing some damage to her. Like, she's finding herself developing some disordered eating because of the things she's seeing people talk about. She's finding herself getting really, like, hyper-focused on skincare and things, and bullying is a big element of this. And so the story is really well done. I thought it was very compelling, very interesting, could not stop reading. I wanted to make sure she was going to be okay. And so there's a lot in here about what social media can do to you if you're not careful, if you're not paying attention. There's stuff about algorithms. It talks a lot about, like, dopamine and, like, why we are so compelled to keep checking our phones and that kind of thing. So I thought this was great. Definitely recommend reading this with your tweens. I read Shark Teeth by Sherry Winston. And let me tell you, one of the things that I love about doing Sybils is that you start seeing patterns. Sometimes it's a pattern in a title, but sometimes it's a pattern in, like, why are we writing about this specific thing so much? A couple of years ago when I did Sybils for the first time, I thought it was interesting that there was multiple books about kids learning about the Civil War. This year, I've read so far 3 books about mothers abandoning their children. And can I just say, I don't want to read another one of those. They're always really good and really well done and all of that, but I just don't think I can take it anymore. Shark Teeth is one of those books. This is a story about a girl who, her mother had her very young, and so they've kind of grown up together. And her mother is not a good mother. She has multiple times abandoned her kids to go on, like, week-long benders, and that is something that happens in this story. And her younger siblings and she has to, like, take care of them, basically, because who else is going to do it? They also don't have a good relationship with their grandmother. It's a story about a girl who has to kind of be in charge of her family. She has to remember to pay the bills. She has to help her mom babysit all of the time. And she's only like 11 or 12 in this story. And so I don't know if I could read another one of these books because they hurt me too much. I am so sad for these kids, and I just am so angry at these mothers. But this was a really good book, and it touches on, like, things like foster care. It touches on things like finding a way to move on with your life when you've been put in charge too much. And it was really well done. It's a beautiful story, like, about Sharkita, the main character, like, finding a way through this and finding a way to still be with her siblings even though they're separated in foster care homes and that sort of thing. So I just don't know if I can read another one of those. I'm hoping that I've read all of the ones that are nominated. I read Gut Reaction by Kirby Larson. This is a story about a girl who has Crohn's disease, and she's, like, diagnosed with it over the course of the story. She believes that all her stomach pain has to do with the grief she feels because her father recently died. And she loves to bake and cook, and that is a thing she did with her father. And so she still wants to keep doing that, but she keeps feeling these, like, intense stomach pains. And she is associating the pain with the grief she's feeling for her father. But over the course of the story, she finds out that actually she has Crohn's disease, and it's her coming to terms with, like, what that means for her going forward. I was interested to read this because I don't have Crohn's, but I have ulcerative colitis. I've had stomach problems my entire life, so, like, it was interesting to read about that perspective because it's not something I've seen very often. And I thought it was really well done. I do wish we could have skipped the grief part because I feel like there's so many middle grade books where a parent dies. Overall, I thought this was really well done. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good representation for chronic illness, and I'm glad that I read it. And I gave this 5 stars. I read Not Nothing by Gail Forman. This was a book that I had been excited to read for months. I pre-ordered this because I just had like a really good feeling about it, and I was right. This book was so good. So I listened to the audiobook along with the physical book because I like to do that. And the audio for this is fantastic. Like, if you can listen to it, I highly recommend doing so. The narrator does absolutely phenomenal work with voices. So we're following a boy who has done something terrible, but we don't really know what. But his punishment is community service at a nursing home. And that is where he meets the person who is narrating this book, who is 107 years old, and he is telling his story to the boy and kind of explaining to him, like, what happened to him during World War II. And when I tell you this book broke me, in the best way, like, I haven't cried like that reading a book since The Book Thief. Like, I was full on sobbing at the end of this book, and I just cannot stop thinking about it. This is a story about why we shouldn't judge somebody when we don't really know the whole story. This is a book about how even when someone does something terrible, that doesn't mean they are necessarily a terrible person. Sometimes we do bad things out of a, like, place of fear or out of a place of deep sadness. And we can learn when the right people help us to find our way back to our humanity, to find a way to turn that around. I'm going to start crying because this book was so good. Again, though, sad parent stuff in this one. In this case, I think the boy's mother is mentally unstable, and I think she's had to be put into a home, and like, he is living with his aunt, who he feels doesn't really love him, doesn't really want him there. So this kid is dealing with so much. He doesn't feel like anyone loves him. He doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He doesn't really have any friends. And so he befriends this very old man who hasn't spoken to anybody in years. This is the first time he's talked and told anybody his story, and it's so good. Like, sometimes middle grade hits just right, and this is one of those books. I'm not gonna cry. I'm thinking about it too much. This is one of those books that I just want everyone to read because it was so beautiful. Okay, moving on. I read Abigail Hall by Lauren A. Forey. This was one of my 12 recommendations from 12 friends, and I really didn't know anything about this book going in. I went in kind of I knew it was gothic, and I knew that it was set like in the aftermath of World War II, but that's it. This is a story about sisters who, the older sister, Eliza, is taking care of her younger sister, Rebecca. They're really close in age, though, but that is something that I struggled with throughout the whole book. Like, how much older is Eliza than Rebecca? Because the way Rebecca is written, she feels like she's like 10, but I feel like also they mentioned at one point when they were younger that they're only like 2 years apart. So I found the age discrepancy confusing throughout the story because Rebecca is written to feel much younger. But Rebecca has some issues. And over the course of the story, we kind of start to see like how mentally unstable she is. And Eliza is like her caregiver, basically. She doesn't know what else to do. She has to stick with her sister no matter what because no one else will. And they're sent away to live in this house. And I don't really want to tell you much more because this is one of those books that the less you know going in, the more interesting it is. But there is a sort of like haunted house ghost vibes. However, This book does one of the things that I strongly dislike, in which it sets it up to be like, ooh, spooky ghosts, but actually just people. I don't like that. That is something that I don't enjoy in thrillers, where I think it's gonna lean one way and I get really into like the supernatural element, and then all of a sudden it's like, just kidding, there's nothing supernatural here at all. It's just people being bad. So I didn't love that. But I did find the ambiance of this book, the atmosphere, so well done. Like, this book has so much great gothic vibes. If you love gothic historical stories, like, this has all of those vibes. You will enjoy that. The relationships were really interesting too. The dynamics between the sisters. There's also the whole storyline with Peter, who is Eliza's boyfriend, like, desperately trying to figure out what happened to her. She just disappears one day and he doesn't know why. He doesn't know how to find her. So he's like, there's this whole side plot with him like digging into like, why is she gone? Where did she go? Why would she just leave without telling him? And some of that gets a little unwieldy with the plot, to be honest, but overall, like, I enjoyed my time with this book. I gave it like 3.5 stars. And then the last book I want to talk about, I wanted to squeeze in one scary book. Like, Abigail Hall kind of fit, but not quite. But I really wanted some horror. It's October. Like, I wanted something spooky. So I happened to pre-order Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy, and I had that pre-ordered as an ebook. So I remembered one day when all of a sudden I was looking to see what ebook I should start next, and I saw that was there. I was like, oh, perfect. So I don't even know how to talk about this book. I don't want to give anything away. It's a novella. It's only like 128 pages long, so it's short, which is why I wanted to read it, because I figured I could get through it pretty fast, and I did. This is super fast paced, but I feel like talking about it will give away too many plot elements. I think all you really want to know is that this is set in a gas station in the bathroom. This has some big trigger warnings, though. This is like his take on extreme horror, and honestly, I don't think it was that extreme. However, if you cannot handle gore and like a lot of weird violence, this is probably not for you. I told Sarah not to read it because she has a lot of anxiety about getting trapped in bathrooms. and also there's some like spiders and snakes and things, and I don't think she'd like this. But if you can handle that kind of stuff, this was actually so good. Like, I can officially say now that I have read 3 things from Nat Cassidy that he is one of my favorite authors of all time. Like, I will read absolutely anything Nat Cassidy writes going forward. This story is also really Jewish, and I did not expect that. Like, Nestlings had a lot of Jewish stuff in it. Mary did not. So I didn't really know what was going to happen in this book, but the main character is going home to see his bubby, his grandmother, before she passes. She's had a stroke. They think she's going to die. So he doesn't like her, though. They don't have a very good relationship, which is something I related to a lot, because I also did not have a good relationship with my bubby. And she was also not a nice person. So, like, him reflecting on, like, how nasty this woman has been to him his whole life, but also feeling compelled to go see her because family. So he's going home, but he's trying to take his time. And he even stops at this gas station and is like, well, it'll delay my getting there a little bit if I stop. Be careful what you wish for. But this is a lot to say about, like, dealing with death, but also, like, I don't even know how to say what I want to say here. This is a story about dealing with family. This is a story about, like, finding your breaking point and not being sure if you are getting through it or if you are breaking more. It's dark, it's messy, it's gross, but I freaking loved it. This book was so good. I can't wait to read more by Nat Cassidy. So yeah, those are the highlights. That's not everything I read this month, but those are the things that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, let me know in the comments, what did you read in October? What was your favorite book you read in October? I'm trying to decide what my favorite thing was. I think it might be Not Nothing, honestly. I think that might have been like the best thing I read this month. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that. Not Nothing by Gail Forman was my favorite book of October. So let me know down below what your favorite book of October was. I would love to know. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye!